Millionaire chefs laughed at this poor dishwasher. What she revealed was absolutely inspiring. Jess stood by the sink, her hands immersed in steaming suds while the cacophony of the bustling kitchen echoed around her. It was a symphony of clanking pots, sizzling pans, and high-pitched laughter from the Millionaire chefs, the self-proclaimed masters of the culinary world. Look at her, dreaming about serving gourmet meals. One chef scoffed, his laughter ricocheting off the walls like a cruel taunt. Jess clenched her jaw, stifling the anger simmering within. She longed to retaliate, to show them the creative sparks bubbling beneath her unassuming exterior. But here she was, famished ambition bound with the loyalty she felt for her two younger siblings sleeping in their cramped apartment nearby. Pressure mounted daily. Each scrubbed plate reflected the sacrifices she made for her family, their needs eclipsing her own desires. Jess took night classes at community college, balancing them against her long hours in the kitchen. The thought of her siblings with their bright futures stifled by their surroundings drove her irrational fear. What if she never escaped the dish pit? Could their laughter muffled by the walls of their apartment haunt her forever? Fueled by relentless dedication, she found herself caught in her chef's world, one that had ignored her silent battles and demurred her dreams. It hurt more than the grease-stained wrists she bore. What if I fail? The gnawing thought clawed at her every night, refusing to let her sleep as she tossed and turned in a sea of doubts and busy schedules. She wanted to break the barrier that separated dishwashers from top-tier chefs, yet they relentlessly wielded their prestige, mocking any hints of ambition held by someone like her. Before she could blink, the tension boiled over. A heated argument erupted between her and the renowned chef, who remained unmoved by her conviction that every role was vital in the kitchen. Jess snapped, her heart racing in sync with the pounding pots behind her. My dish deserves respect too. The silence that followed was deafening, her own voice a rippling echo of desperation. As boldness surged through her veins, the opportunity presented itself. She hesitated only a moment longer before collecting her cherished family recipe from deep within her soul, one she had held on to for years, infused with love and nostalgia. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With trembling hands, she presented the dish to the sneering chefs. The aroma filled the air, shifting the atmosphere entirely. Suspicion and intrigue mingled among them as they regarded her with newfound caution. Yet, beneath the exhilaration lies a thicker layer of doubt. What if they took another jab at her? The questions dangled like shadows, casting her insecurities in sharp relief. Would her family's hopes weigh her down, or lift her higher? From the corners of the kitchen, whispers began to swirl. Jess felt like a bird poised to take flight, but every time she spread her wings, her doubts eclipsed the thrill. What if her next step landed her facing the same disdain that had become part of her daily existence? The looming question made her stomach twist with uncertainty. She thought of the upcoming culinary showdown, a chance to make her mark in a world so unkind to those who dared to dream beyond the confines of the dish pit. As the evening wore on and the scornful laughter faded into the distance, Jess leaned against the cold metal counter. She caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection, part determined dreamer, part burdened soul. Just then, her phone buzzed, and she glanced down. An unexpected message pulled her breath back into her lungs, bearing an invitation from a chef whose last words to her stung like acid. Every beat in her chest felt like a war drum echoing a choice she had yet to grasp fully. Would she dare to step into a realm where expectations were suffocating, or would she choose to challenge those who had so callously belittled her? The vibrant streets of New Orleans blurred before her as Jess stood on the precipice of a decision that could alter everything. Jess stared at her phone, the glow illuminating her conflicted expression in the dimly lit kitchen. The message from Chef Langston bore not just an invitation, but a daunting ultimatum, a chance to prove herself or fade back into obscurity. She could almost hear the laughter of the millionaire chefs swirling around her, as though challenging her to rise above her shameful past as a mere dishwasher. Tension knotted in her stomach. Jess weighed each heartbeat, pondering what success would mean aside from personal triumph. In her world, it equated to stability, opportunity, and perhaps a chance for her siblings to escape the cycle of struggle. She clenched her jaw, set her shoulders, and allowed determination to kindle within her. Maybe, just maybe, this moment was the shift she ached for. Her mind buzzed with plans as she grabbed a notepad from beneath a mountain of discarded takeout menus. She would need to refine her dish, drawing from every ounce of culinary intuition and those night classes she had painstakingly balanced. Would they respect the rich flavors of her family's recipe, or would they scoff at her humble origins? The weight of potential rejection, once a crushing weight, now transformed into fuel for her ambition. Each strike of the pen felt cathartic, a release from the chains of self-doubt. Jess scribbled down her ideas with fervor, the spiced notes of her grandmother's gumbo paired with innovative techniques she'd recently learned in class. This could blend heritage with expertise, a concoction that would not only showcase her culinary vision, but also assert her rightful place in this kitchen, dominated by authority figures who thrived on elitism. It wasn't long before determination turned into panic. Could she truly make them understand? The voices that echoed in her memory, laced with disdain, cast shadows over her ambitions. What if she faltered? What if her dish didn't evoke the emotions she spent years perfecting? She could practically feel the dismissive chuckles echoing in her mind, snuffing out the light that grew ever brighter. Gritting her teeth, Jess decided to confront her fears with proactive steps. She approached the dreaded chef that had mocked her for the last time, seeking clarity amidst the swirl of insecurity. With the stakes at the forefront of her mind, she boldly sought feedback, asking how she could elevate her dish within the rigid structure of their high-pressure environment. The unexpected skepticism in his eyes ignited a fire in her resolve. She had nothing to lose now. Hours turned into days as she immersed herself in research and experimentation. Jess learned to adapt her unique family recipe, melding it with contemporary presentation techniques. Each trial sparked new visions of flavor, clearing away the daunting shadow of her past. She felt herself evolving, pushing boundaries she once believed were firmly set. But as the showdown drew closer, anxiety seeped back in like water through a crack. What if her improvements were insufficient? Each new taste was a step toward discovery, yet doubt still clouded her mind. She grappled with memories of nights spent over cookbooks, determined to learn everything she could despite the exhaustion that pulled at her. The day of the culinary challenge blazed with urgency. Jess arrived at the venue, heart racing. The smell of competition hung heavily in the air, mingling with the sense of ingredients that would serve moments of victory and defeat. She breathed deeply, channeling her nerves into focus. Every lesson learned, every drop of sweat shed as she fought against the tides of circumstance, fueled her unwavering mission, to carve a place for herself in a world set against her. As she gathered her ingredients, her heart pounded in rhythm with purpose. This was her moment to reclaim her narrative, to redefine herself in front of those who doubted her. But as the competition loomed ahead, something stirred in her gut. A challenge beyond cooking was about to unfold, something that would test not only her skills, but the very essence of who she was. And amidst the chaos, the thought lingered. How far was she willing to go to truly belong? The kitchen buzzed with relentless energy, an undercurrent of tension woven through the clang of pots and the sizzle of pans. Jess stood at her station, her senses heightened, her palms slick with anticipation. She had fought valiantly to reach this point, yet the moment felt surreal. Every competitive whisper echoed warnings of potential disgrace. The stakes were monumental. She could no longer hide behind the shadows of her past. Slowly, she began to arrange her ingredients, placing the vibrant vegetables and fragrant spices with care. Each familiar texture flooded her with nostalgia, reminding her of childhood scents that wrapped around her like home. Yet, doubts lurked, ready to latch onto any misstep she made, eager to drag her backward to the dishwasher quarters she had desperately yearned to escape. Time ticked down, and an unsettling thought pierced through her focus. Was she merely a girl with a dream, or was she a force capable of breathtaking creation? She breathed deeply, adopting an unyielding mindset. For her siblings, for herself, she needed to prove her worth, to mold her passions with precision, and to showcase the recipe honed over years of sweat and struggle. As the clock began its final countdown, Jess whisked spices into her pot with a fervor that churned her spirit. The melding of flavors released a symphony that resonated with her ambitions. Each stir was more than a step in her dish's preparation. It was a movement toward self-affirmation. This was about more than just culinary triumph. It was a proclamation of resilience against the facts of her upbringing. Yet just as she began to find her rhythm, movement at the corner of her eye caused her heart to stutter. Chef Langston was watching. His scrutiny cut through the fray of noise, the weight of his gaze more threatening than any rival. She felt the presence of his expectations, pressing upon her like a promise she feared to break. Was he judging her efforts, or was there possibility laced in his scrutiny? Overwhelmed, Jess wrestled with a wave of vulnerability. She'd trained for this moment, yet the fragility inside her quaked. The notion of being merely an extension of her past gnawed at the edges of her resolve. What if the concoction she brewed didn't resonate? What if it merely symbolized failure? The laughter in her memory returned, a mocking echo of all the times she had been belittled, stoking the flames of existential dread. With sharpened focus, Jess summoned her courage. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and locked her gaze back on the pot simmering in front of her. This time, she wouldn't just cook, she'd tell a story through each layer of flavor. She wouldn't make a dish for the approval of others. This was her legacy laid bare. Her grandmother's whispers would guide her deft hands to articulate the passion infusing every ingredient. Time slipped away like grains of sand as she plated her dish. Here it was, the gumbo that represented her identity, carefully transformed with modern techniques, rich in sentiment but honed with professionalism. She took a moment before she served, a breath to solidify her intent. This was not only for the judges to taste, it was for every moment of sacrifice, every late-night study session, and every time she had doubted herself. This was her moment. The nervous energy surrounding her thrummed with tension as she presented her dish. She felt exposed, an artist revealing her soul to a world that had told her she was unworthy. Jess prepared to bask in judgment, but as she faced the critical eyes of Chef Langston and the other judges, one thought surged through her mind. Would she find acceptance, or would she ultimately be the punchline of their expectations? The moment of truth had arrived. The plates gleamed under the bright lights, a world of possibilities trapped behind glass as Jess stood with her heart racing. She'd poured not only her ingredients into that gumbo, but her history, her battles, and her dreams. The judges' furtive glances exchanged between one another felt like judgment passed upon a liturgical altar, and Jess could almost hear her pulse echo in the silence that stretched out before her. Chef Langston leaned forward, his brow furrowed and his expression unreadable, a wall she desperately wanted to breach. What was he thinking? The air thickened with expectation, which mirrored her instant anxiety, awakening her foul memories of being looked down upon for the choices she once had no control over. But just as quickly, the fiery resolve she'd cultivated in this very moment pushed back, reminding her that she had the agency now. "Let's begin," Chef Langston pronounced, slicing through the tension. He took the first bite, and it was as if time suspended. The fork met his lips, and she couldn't breathe. Was it okay? Did it taste how she hoped? The other judges followed suit, and their expressions flickered between intrigue and contemplation. Jess's gaze darted between them, each second feeling like an eternity. A surge of doubt tried to latch onto her mind, but Jess forced it down. This was her moment. If she fell, she would rise. If she failed, it would inform her next battle. Every iteration, every misstep, was an opportunity for growth. As Chef Langston chewed thoughtfully, she analyzed his face, searching for hints of approval within that stoic mask. Was that the subtle twist of his lips suggesting a smile, or was it simply the play of shadows across a serious demeanor? The second judge followed, and mutters of complex and layered hung in the air. Heart pounding, Jess felt as if the very essence of who she was hinged upon their revelations. "Jess, this is bold," Langston finally said, breaking the tension like a fragile crystal shattering. "You've taken risks in merging tradition and innovation. It speaks volumes, both about you as a chef and about your story. Now tell us, what inspired this creation?" Her spirit soared through the haze of panic as his attention shifted to her. It was one thing to serve a dish. It was another to articulate not just the flavors, but her identity wrapped up in them. She thought of her grandmother, whose legacy was woven through the very threads of this gumbo. With clarity she opened up, recounting tales of him stirring pots filled with magic on peppery nights while teaching her resilience and passion. "A gumbo is personal," she explained, buoyed by the authenticity of her tale. "It's about letting flavors come together, about understanding that every ingredient has its place and purpose, much like life's trials and triumphs." As Jess spoke, she noticed a subtle shift in the judges' expressions. Was that acceptance she saw in their eyes, or merely compassion? Even if they didn't fully appreciate her, her conviction breathed life into her dreams in a way she hadn't felt before. This wasn't merely about winning. It was about claiming her space and her flavors. It was about the journey she had taken to rise above. Each word crystallized her growth and determination, sending waves of empowerment through her body. She had reached a turning point, a moment where she could redefine not just how she was seen, but how she saw herself in the world of culinary arts. As the judges prepared to share their critiques, Jess felt a newfound strength surge within her. The potential for failure no longer terrified her. It transformed into fuel for her ambition. Those echoes of belittlement, they could no longer shape her narrative. And then, just as she began to sense a vibrant path unfurling before her, a shadow loomed behind the judges. A towering figure, familiar, yet intimidating, moved through the assembly. Jess's heart sank, her moment of triumph suddenly on the brink of potential disruption. The air shifted, tension clamped once more. The figure stepped forward, voice booming. "I have something to say about the real story behind this dish." The room fell into a weighted stillness, the familiar voice bursting through Jess's mind like a sharp knife piercing soft butter. It was Marley, the famed chef and culinary entrepreneur whom she had both admired and feared. He commanded attention, holding the audience captive as his words rippled through the air, an electrifying blend of sarcasm and authority. His presence filled the space, draining the warmth from Jess's moment of vulnerability. "Let's hear the fairy tale behind this gumbo," Marley said, a trace of a smirk playing on his lips. The judges turned to face him, clearly intrigued. "A personal story of perseverance, right? And yet, it seems like nostalgia is all you're relying on." Jess clenched her fists, her palms prickling as heat flushed her cheeks. It was infuriating how one person could still hold such power over her emotions. She mustered a slow breath, the lingering sting driving her to confront the doubt surging within. Marley's insightful layers of critique had always felt like a gauntlet she'd never been prepared to run, a reminder of her humble beginnings. But not today. Her eyes found Chef Langston's, who seemed unfazed, embodying the calm in the maelstrom. She caught a glimmer of encouragement, which settled her racing thoughts. "No, Marley," Jess replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "It's not nostalgia. It's my reality. Each ingredient in this gumbo carries a lesson from my past, a narrative shaped by resilience." Marley's brow arched skeptically. "Resilience, you say? Can't a dish just be about taste? Or maybe it's about the flash of a brand? You know, the kind that sells?" He turned back to the judges, an amused chuckle escaping him. "I think we all know that the food industry isn't built on sentiment." A ripple of discomfort washed over Jess. Was he right? In a world driven by trends and social media, could her story be dismissed as a mere artifact of nostalgia? The tension between her heart and mind surged fiercely. She knew this was bigger than the gumbo. It was about confronting her battles and redefining the essence of her culinary path. Perhaps my gumbo isn't a flashy plate, Jess continued, leaning into her truth. Her confidence surged like the simmering pot of spices she loved. But just like every ingredient, every hardship I faced adds depth to my identity. This dish stands for those who have been silenced. It's not just taste, it's about connection. A moment to pause, reflect, and feel. Marley scowled as questions began swirling in her mind, each one tied to her growth. Was she somehow reinventing her own definition of success? What if her journey could inspire others rather than be mocked or overshadowed? Prove it, Marley challenged, his bravado unyielding. Show us that your culinary choices can stand tall on their own merit. A tense silence enveloped the room once more, as anticipation hung thick in the air. Jess's heart raced, not with fear now, but with the adrenaline of possibility. She could almost hear the echoes of her grandmother's laughter, reminding her of the pride woven into their legacy. This was the moment she could rise, not just as a chef but as a visionary. But could she transform her experience into a sustained triumph? Did she possess the tenacity to break down Marley's taunts and emerge stronger? Glancing at Langston, she noticed something new in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps even admiration. The air hummed with energy, shifting towards her. Taking a deep breath, she faced Marley with renewed determination. Then let's create something together that speaks volumes. A collaboration that breaks the barriers of perception. Marley smirked, intrigued by her challenge. All right, let's see what you can conjure. As the lines were drawn, Jess felt fragile yet fearless. The stakes had never been higher, and with this opportunity, the potential for growth loomed brightly ahead. Yet even in the shadow of competition, doubt whispered insidiously, asking if she could truly rise to the occasion. This was no longer just about winning a competition. It was a chance to redefine who she was and what she could become. The first step was chosen, but the path forward remained uncertain. Would she be able to prove her worth amid the fierce scrutiny of Marley and the judges? Would the flavors of her journey meld into something unforgettable? Or would she crumble under the pressure? Just as she began to strategize, Jess felt a new wave of urgency pulse through her. The journey into her own strength had only just begun. What would she discover about herself as the challenge unfolded? Would this be the opportunity she had been waiting for? Or an ending she feared might come far too soon? Jess stood in the kitchen, the din of clanking pots and sizzling pans swirling around her as she tried to focus. The onset of the challenge with Marley ignited a different fire within her, one that pushed her beyond her usual boundaries. Collaborating with someone as illustrious as Marley was daunting, yet it stirred a barely there sense of potential that made her pulse quicken. She had to step beyond the familiar plays of her comfort zone. Her mind raced through possibilities. It wasn't just about crafting a dish that might impress Marley. It was about forging a narrative that was unequivocally hers. What if I could weave every moment of struggle into something profound? Something that created an experience, she thought, envisioning not just flavors but an entire sensory journey. She gathered her ingredients, her hands moving with intention. Each component, smoky sausage, tender okra, earthy spices, beckoned a memory. Those ingredients weren't merely for a dish. They were touch points to her past, a past that had shaped her who she was today. What Marley saw as remnants of nostalgia were, to her, the foundation of her identity. As she diced and sautéed, she felt the space around her shift. The kitchen buzzed with energy, and it became clear she was not alone in her mission. Chef Langston emerged from the corner with a knowing nod, as if sensing her transformation. Keep going, Jess. Every dish has a story. Yours is just waiting to be told, he encouraged, leaning against the counter, watching her with intent. His support became a lifeline, pulling her through the anxieties plaguing her thoughts. Exactly, she murmured, a smile touching her lips. His words resurrected a conviction she hadn't felt in some time. Her heart pounded with each chop of the knife, the rhythm echoing the pulse of the story she was determined to create. Marley wove closer, tossing in questions with an air of mockery. So what's the twist? What will elevate this from a mere home-cooked meal to gastronomic art? It pushed her further, a challenge she accepted. It's the connection, she shot back, her voice stronger now. Food isn't just to eat, it's about experience, memories shared around a table. It's laughter, joy, and sometimes pain. She stirred the pot, watching the colors blend harmoniously. It's transcendent. Marley raised an eyebrow, his smirk softened but remained skeptical. Transcendent, huh? It's a big word for an inspiring dish, a mixture of self-doubt and determination traipsed through her mental landscape again. But Jess wouldn't give in. She could feel it. This was her time to shine. Not just for the judges, not for Marley, but for herself. She poured her essence into the pot, marrying flavors that mirrored her life's complexity. Time ticked away with the urgency of a ticking clock. The judges would be evaluating every inch of her presentation, every flavor on the palate. The thought blissfully terrified her. This was much more than cooking. This was revelation. Carefully, Jess began to plate her creation, each element placed deliberately. Her hands, once timid and unsteady, now operated with assured purpose. She crafted her dish with a narrative, a mosaic of her journey, an artful fusion of fear and faith. Finally, she stepped back, illuminated by the fluorescent lights, soaking in her creation. This was her truth, her experiences crystallized in a bowl. Would they see it? Would Marley understand? That's it, Langston affirmed, pride flickering in his gaze. She turned to face the judges, inhaling deeply. Jess was ready for the scrutiny, yet she felt the pulse of self-awareness thrumming within her. She was no longer just a dishwasher in the shadows. She was a force carving her path. What would her dish reveal to those who tasted it? Would Marley's challenge frighten her back into obscurity, or propel her into the spotlight she had always imagined? Jess braced herself. She was on the precipice of something transformative, and there was no turning back now. As she faced the scrutinizing gaze of Marley and the judges, the moment had come for her to shine. Would they see her for who she truly was? Jess inhaled deeply, steadied her nerves, and focused on the judging panel before her. The air felt thick with expectation, and each tick of the clock punctuated her mounting anxiety. She fought to maintain her composure, reciting in her mind what she wanted them to feel when they tasted her creation. Marley leaned closer, scrutinizing the dish with an intensity that made her heart race. "Let's see if this transcendent experience really exists," he challenged, his smirk hardly concealing his doubts. With a gentle, yet deliberate movement, Jess offered her plate. As the judges took their first bites, she observed their reactions closely, watching for any sign of appreciation or incredulity. She couldn't afford to flinch. This was the moment she had prepared for. The flavors danced on their tongues, and for an instant, time hung suspended between them. Would they connect with her narrative? This was her story on a plate, intertwined with her hopes and fears, her very essence served on porcelain. Suddenly a spark ignited in Marley's eyes. "I understand the smoky undertones now," he remarked, his voice low, yet resonating. Jess's heart swelled slightly. Maybe she had managed to convey the nuances she felt in her cooking. Maybe her truth was finding its audience. But the other judges remained inscrutable, their faces a canvas painted with varying shades of contemplation. Jess's heart sank slightly. Doubt trickled back in, mingling with the lingering pride of presenting her dish. Had she communicated her experience effectively, or had she been too caught up in her recollections to deliver on the technical front? Langston's supportive gaze from the sidelines bolstered her resolve. She could no longer be that frightened girl squashing her potential under the weight of expectation. She needed to reclaim her narrative, not just for the judges but for herself. What did she have to lose at this point? As Marley continued speaking, Jess seized the moment. "Food is a dialogue," she interjected, determined. Her voice was steady now, a stark contrast to the quaking uncertainty she felt moments earlier. "It brings people together, evokes memories, and sometimes confronts them. The sausage speaks to family gatherings. The spices narrate the spirit of tradition. This dish is my journey, my exploration of who I am." Marley paused, seemingly taken aback. "That's bold," he replied. "But boldness isn't always the same as flavor." Each word he uttered sharpened the knife of her self-doubt deeper. Jess felt the pressing weight of his skepticism, but she quickly transformed that tension into fuel. She needed to push beyond mere defense of her dish. She had to show him, show them, all that she was becoming. As they dissected her culinary creation further, every question morphed into an opportunity to share her insights and the unwavering connections she cherished. She spoke of her childhood memories, fighting to keep the tremor out of her voice, driven by a passion igniting her core. Words tumbled from her as each bite of her dish resonated with her words. A not-so-loose connection was drawing her closer to the spotlight. The conversations shifted to her methods, the technique of blending ingredients, the intent behind the presentation. There was a distinct shift in tone, a gradual thawing of Marley's facade, signaling he was beginning to appreciate the authenticity behind her dish. As the judges deliberated, Jess stepped away from the fiery scrutiny, the knot in her stomach easing slightly. She sensed a change in the air, a palpable energy of respect coiling around her, but her thoughts spiraled into a different realm. What if their judgment surpassing expectations did not manifest? What if they still found her wanting? The stakes were as high as the altitude she was climbing. She had never known this feeling of exposed vulnerability combined with fierce determination. No matter the outcome, she realized her development was already inching toward something greater. She no longer wanted to hide. She wanted to forge ahead, let the world witness her transformation, her new identity. As the judges returned into the light, Jess's heart raced anew. Did her dish resonate with their perceptions? Had the culinary journey she had conveyed through her creation truly mattered to them? The moment of truth unraveled, their expressions caught between contemplation and revelation, and Jess braced herself for the announcement that could alter her destiny. Would they recognize her growth, or would Marley's doubt extinguish her flame? The ambiguity loomed uncertain as the rising tension in the room. Behind it all, the question lingered in her mind. Who was she truly becoming? Would she confront her own doubts, or would they define her forever? As she stood on the precipice of revelation, poised for the verdict, Jess felt her heart beat in sync with her ambitions, the path ahead shrouded in thrilling uncertainty. The panel's deliberations stretched into an eternity, a manifestation of time stilled, filled with throbbing anticipation. Jess could feel the sweat pooling in the small of her back, yet her mind raced with visions of what victory, or defeat, might look like. She had embraced vulnerability, shown a piece of her soul, and now it all hinged on those simple words. And the winner is? As they finally approached her, Jess steadied herself, a quiet determination etched into her resolve. She could no longer afford to tether her confidence to mere approval from others. She understood now, more than ever, that this journey was not solely about validation. It was about self-discovery, about pulling away the dusty layers to reveal her true passion for culinary art. Jess, Marley began, his demeanor noticeably more respectful as he addressed her. You've made great strides. We appreciated your depth and the narrative you've woven throughout your dish. She felt a flicker of hope kindling within, but the acknowledgement was swiftly tempered by Marley's next statement. However, he continued, many elements still fell short in execution. This is still a competition. Jess felt her pulse quicken, anticipation now laced with apprehension. The other judges nodded in agreement, their neutral expressions reminiscent of a stern teacher assessing a student's progress, caring, yet unyielding. Jess's heart sank briefly at their retrospection. She craved to leave an indelible mark, yet here she was, stranded between a stepping stone and a stumbling block. We want you to refine your skills, Langston interjected, stepping in with a supportive tone. Let this be an impetus for growth. You're not just a competitor. You're a storyteller born for this industry. There it was, that moment of solidarity, a tether thrown in an uncertain sea. Standing amidst the judging panel, Jess realized her path wasn't solitary. She could leverage this. There was a decision to be made, laden with gravity. Would she retreat once more, diminished by criticism, or would she forge ahead, evolving into something exceptional? Struck by the burning realization of potential brewing just beneath her surface, She sensed the need to embrace adversity as a teacher rather than a foe. It was no longer merely about her dish. The very act of expressing her artistry had been a reclamation of her identity, a deliberate choice to confront the insecurities that had bound her for too long. "Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate the honesty," she replied, her voice steady, carrying a newfound weight. "I will work on these elements and return with something more developed." For the first time, Jess saw Marley shift uncomfortably in his seat. His skepticism was precise and cutting, but it faltered in the face of her resolve. It was whispering a truth he hadn't anticipated. This was not a girl on the defensive. This was a woman prepared for the fight ahead. With the panel's verdict looming over her like a specter, Jess sought clarity. She acknowledged her shortcomings but framed her self-conversation with empowerment. What would it demand of her to tackle the very things that had unsettled her? It ignited a fierce determination. She would master those nuances he had dismissed. As she left the judging area, determination surged through her veins. She suddenly envisioned a path where learning from every setback forged her into an innovator rather than merely an imitator. Acceptance and rejection would interlace. She would map it out and use it as a launch pad. But amidst this burgeoning resolve, a new question loomed. How would she gather the resources and mentorship required to navigate this intricate landscape of culinary ambition? With each calculated step away from vulnerability to enterprise, she felt the wind shift. It beckoned her towards a transformative journey, a regeneration of identity that would redefine her strength in the kitchen and beyond. Ready now, she wasn't poised to merely defend her narrative, but to delve into its depths and emerge victorious against the tide of doubt. This chapter of her life was barely unfolding, and what awaited, she didn't yet know. Jess clenched her fists, emboldened by a clear sense of purpose. The moment had come to confront Marley, not merely as an adversary, but as a catalyst for her ultimate evolution in this culinary narrative. What lay ahead would be a true test of her grit, her artistry, and perhaps a basketful of revelations about who she truly wanted to be. As Jess stepped out of the oppressive atmosphere of the judging panel, clarity began to bloom. Each heartbeat resonated with the potential of transformation. This was her moment, a threshold between who she had been and who she could become. Her previous doubts and fears began to feel like an old skin, ready to be shed. Outside, the midday sun cast warm light on the bustling street. The eclectic restaurants and cafes, each emanating their unique aroma, seemed to embrace her with promise. Rather than retreat to familiar comforts, she felt an electric pull toward the bustling culinary world. But where to start? The thoughts raced through her mind like a fast-moving train. A mentor, someone who could offer guidance over the myriad intricate nuances she needed to learn. All she had to do was find one willing soul who could see her for everything she aspired to be. Determined, Jess pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her contacts, hesitating before lingering on Graham, a former chef who had taken her under his wing during her early days in culinary school. His fiery passion for food had inspired her. His expertise had shown her what was possible. "What have I got to lose?" she murmured before pressing call. Just as she pressed the button, a fit of apprehension washed over her. Could she bear to ask for help again after so many missteps? What if he had moved on, lost interest in her chaotic journey? Crushing that fear with an exhale, she lifted the phone to her ear. "Hey Graham, it's Jess." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, as if no time had passed since their last encounter. But Jess found herself growing anxious as she broached the topic of mentorship. She articulated her challenges and expressed her desire to refine her culinary narrative. But she was unsure how persistent her fear of rejection had seeped into her speech. "Jess, you're tenacious, that's what I've always liked about you. I'd love to help you. Why don't you come over tomorrow and we can start brainstorming?" Graham's voice was even and reassuring. Relief washed over her like cool water. Their meeting would be the first step toward her rebirth as a culinary artist. Yet as she hung up, a twinge of doubt lingered. Would Graham's guidance be enough to tackle the complex foundation she needed to build? The hours that followed were a whirlwind of planning, reflection, and the occasional moment of panic. Each dish she experimented on was interwoven with the critique she had received from the judges. Jess noted down areas of improvement, visualizing the plates she would present. Each chop of the knife, the sizzling sound of ingredients hitting the pan, felt less like work and more like exploration. An invitation to experiment with her growing understanding of flavor and balance. With every stir of the pot, she could sense a deeper connection blossoming between her and her culinary art. That night, sleep eluded her as her mind whirred with thoughts and aspirations. She felt relentless in her pursuit, but a nagging fear blossomed in her gut. What if she failed her mentor's expectations? What if he discovered that she wasn't cut out for this life after all? The alarm buzzed early, a jarring reminder of the day ahead. Jess glanced around her small apartment, cluttered but filled with token reminders of her journey. It was a reflection of her chaos, but a fresh promise too. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, she took comfort in the fact that growth was often born from disorder. As she dressed, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The fierce determination in her eyes mirrored the passion rushing through her veins. For once, it seemed she could see not just a competitor, but an artist in her own right. With a sense of purpose that propelled her forward, Jess stepped through her door, ready for the lesson that awaited her and the confrontation that inevitably loomed. This was not the end of her challenges, but the beginning of a much larger narrative. As she navigated toward Graham's restaurant, Jess felt the weight of her decisions settle on her shoulders, a test of her vulnerabilities and the potential for confronting past fears. There was no room for retreat now. She would discover exactly what it meant to evolve, one step at a time. But deep down, a new question began forming as she turned the corner. What if the very mentorship she sought might unveil aspects of herself she had buried deep for too long? As Jess entered Graham's restaurant, the familiar scent of spices and sautéed vegetables enveloped her like a warm embrace. This was a place that had once felt like a second home, and now, it had the potential to be the arena where she would fight for her culinary identity. Her resolve solidified as she navigated the kitchen, the organized chaos sparking her anticipation. Graham greeted her with a wide smile and a twinkle of encouragement in his eyes. "Welcome back, Jess. Ready to tap into your creativity?" he asked, motioning her to the prep station. The air buzzed with energy as he guided her through the process. They brainstormed flavor profiles, integrating her family recipe into more contemporary styles. Graham's mentorship unraveled the doubts that had clouded Jess's vision, opening a dialogue where every ingredient, every technique played a role in her story. "I'd like you to think beyond just recipes," Graham said, watching her closely as she sliced vegetables with growing confidence. "What you're creating must resonate with your essence. What's the emotion behind it? What do you want people to feel?" Her fingers paused mid-cut. This question pierced deeply into her core. What was she truly trying to express? She thought about the laughter echoing in her memories, the rich flavors of family dinners, and the dreams she had long since buried under layers of self-doubt. It wasn't merely about the food, it was about connection. Her creativity ignited, and within days Jess began formulating dishes that showcased her identity, weaving her culinary past into her future. Each plate became not just a meal, but an art piece, a representation of her trials and triumphs transformed through flavor. As the weeks passed, Jess found herself not only honing her skills but also challenging the norms that had once intimidated her. She learned to navigate the unyielding kitchen dynamics, transforming her vulnerability into an unwavering resolve. Through her creations, she infused her personality, every bite echoing the journey she had endured. But amidst her newfound momentum came moments of doubt that whispered of Marley's critique. Would these dishes hold up to the prowess of the culinary elite? She took those questions, reflecting on them with Graham, who guided her with wisdom drawn from years of experience. Every chef starts from a place of insecurity, but vulnerability is your greatest asset. Use it to create and connect. By the time her second culinary competition rolled around, Jess stood poised at a crossroad, nervous yet exhilarated. She entered the venue with a blend of excitement and anxiety, the familiar cacophony of the kitchen now fueling her ambition rather than suffocating it. In this challenge, she presented her dish, a modern twist on her grandmother's gumbo. Each component was a tribute, individually meticulous yet collectively harmonious. The judges marveled at the dish's complexity, and as Marley sampled her creation, she felt solid confidence wash over her. "Now this," he said, pausing in thought. "This shows growth. It tells a narrative. I can taste the journey you've embraced." His words settled like a soothing balm over her heart, validating her endeavors. As the competition unfolded, Jess felt more than just relief. She felt pride in her accomplishments. Unfolding her story through food, she demonstrated genuine artistic expression, surpassing the limitations of her past. By the time the judges announced the winner, Jess stood firmly on the foundation she had built, her identity rooted in resilience and creativity. As they called her name, a wave of exhilaration engulfed her. She had emerged as a culinary innovator, but more than that, she had forged her path through authenticity and self-acceptance. In that moment, Jess knew that she had not only reclaimed her narrative but had redefined her life's trajectory. She was no longer synonymous with merely being a dishwasher. She had become a chef with a voice, and her future was brimming with potential waiting to be explored. Jess stepped off the stage, not just a winner of a competition but a warrior of her own story. Now the time has come for you to take action. You need to subscribe now to the channel to follow the twists and turns of our next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, share your love, and help others discover these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible journey of transformation. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Join the community that values resilience and personal growth.